fantastic day. We'll give you all a few minutes to trickle in. I just returned from the World Series of Poker. I'm happy to be back home. Happy to be here with all of you. You're guessing we're going to be seeing an excerpt from the new Cash Game Masterclass. You are. Well, I'm going to be representing it here. Not going quite as in-depth as the Masterclass does, because we can't be here all day. The Masterclass is very, 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 very long. And, we don't have all the time in the world here today. While we're waiting for people to trickle in, we will be discussing my new Cash Game Masterclass that teaches you everything you need to know to crush cash games. It's a big course. We have an introduction discussing, we'll call it the basics. We have all of these sections on just pre-flop play. Each of these videos is something like 10 or 20 minutes long, sometimes longer, depending on the exact topic. We discuss post-flop play. Essentially, how to play literally every spot. Maybe not literally every spot, but the vast majority of all the common spots that you will encounter. We also discuss playing the turn, and today we're going to be discussing how to play the river. We're just going to go through a few very, very big, broad topics and go through a few GTO examples. Also, in the Cash Game Masterclass are videos on various other topics. Dean says, post-flop, you just jam every time. Well, you can actually do that in shallow stack tournaments. It's not that big of a deal. It does not work so well when you're playing 100 big blinds deep or 200 big blinds deep in cash games. No. It does not. It does not work so well in those scenarios. So you have to make sure you know how to play reasonably well post-flop with various stack depths, right? Because say the flop goes check, check, and the turn goes check, check. Well, now you're on the river super deep stacked. That's going to play very differently than if you bet the flop and bet the turn, because then you can somewhat reasonably jam the river, right? So you have to realize that all of these situations are different, unique, and you want to make sure that you are approaching them intelligently. So we are going to be discussing GTO river strategies. If you want to check out my Cash Game Masterclass, we have a big sale right now at pokercoaching.com. Check it out at pokercoaching.com/cyberweek. All right, let's get right to it. Introduction to the river. The river is a complicated street to master, but that's a good thing. The fact that poker is difficult, the fact that you're going to make some errors is good because, well, as Flopness Monster says, the river is where most players drown. It is. The Flopness Monster drowns them on the river. And not just because they're going to get unlucky on the river, but because they're going to make blunders. And I'm going to go through and show you how to play reasonably on the river, and we'll discuss some blunders that people make so that you do not make those blunders. Understand that when you get to the river, you no longer have draws or semi-bluffs as you do on the flop and the turn. For those of you who have not already gone through my cash game or tournament master classes on pokercoaching.com, we categorize our hands into premium hands, draws, marginal made hands, and junk. But on the river, those categories do not necessarily apply because your draws now have zero equity. And your semi-bluffs have zero equity, right? Because they are no good. They're bad. They're terrible hands. So you have to figure out, is this a value bet or is this a bluff, right? So when you're value betting, you expect to win at showdown when you get called greater than 50% of the time for the most part. That's a relatively loose definition because when you're out of position, it's a little bit different than when you're in position. A bluff is when you expect to lose at the showdown when you get called very close to 100% of the time. Now, obviously, sometimes you take a hand like ace high and you bluff it, or king high and you bluff it, and your opponent makes a ridiculous call and you win. It's always nice when that happens. But for the most part, when you're bluffing, you expect to lose when you get called. The goal of value betting is to extract maximum value from the worst hands in your opponent's range as often as possible, whereas the goal of bluffing is to force better hands to fold and also to get calls when you happen to have a value hand. It's important to realize that when you're approaching poker from a good, strong, fundamentally sound point of view, you're not thinking, I have a value hand, how much do I bet in order to get my opponent to call? It's a very simplistic way to approach poker, but To be fair, it could be fine against horrible opponents. If your opponents are oblivious, sometimes the right strategy is simple as, how I think my opponent has middle pair most of the time, how much will they call with middle pair? Or when you're bluffing, I think my opponent has middle pair, how much do I have to bet to get my opponent to fold middle pair? Imagine in a scenario you could bet half pot and middle pair would call every time, but you bet pot and middle pair will fold every time. Well, then when you're bluffing, just bet pot, and when you're value betting, bet half pot. It's not that hard whenever that's how poorly your opponents play. But we're presuming our opponents are not going to play horribly bad. When your opponents play horribly bad, you have found a gold mine. Just play the strategy that will maximally exploit your opponent. So let's discuss how to think when you are facing a bet. You need to analyze your range, and you do this by asking, how many bet sizes should I be using to bet for value in this particular spot? Sometimes you want 2 sizes, sometimes maybe more, depending on how difficult you want your strategy to be. What sizes should those sizes be? How exactly should I structure my range such that the hands are put into various bet sizes? What percentage of bluffs do I need to have for each bet size? And how did the river card impact my entire range's equity? Okay? Then you want to consider your exact hand. Should you bet or check this exact hand? If I bet for value, which size should I use with this exact hand? And if I bet as a bluff, why am I choosing this hand to bluff? These are all things that you need to be considering. I want to thank all of you for being here today. If you're enjoying the video, if you're happy to be here, click the like and subscribe buttons below. Also click the notification bell. I'd appreciate it. Can we use these strategies in online cash games? Yeah, sure, definitely. Finally caught me live. Welcome. Can you still get the Black Friday sale? Well, you can get the Cyber Week sale. Check it out at pokercoaching.com/cyberweek. All right, first things first. You need to have 2 bet sizes on the river. Something a lot of people do very wrong is they have only 1 bet size on the river. They always bet, let's say, pot on the river, no matter what. And that's a blunder. That is a blunder. You need to make sure you have various bet sizes. And usually, from an implementable point of view, you're going to want to utilize 2 distinct sizes. Okay? This 2-size strategy is going to serve 2 main purposes. It allows you to get maximum value with hands that are way ahead, and it lets you get some value with hands that are a little bit ahead. And in general, you're going to want to bet bigger with your premium hands and smaller with your decently strong hands that are marginal, right? This is going to be stuff like top pair bad kicker. Your premium hands are going to be hands like 2 pair and better to some extent. Obviously, it depends on the board. Some may think that this is a very unbalanced strategy because if you're betting big with all of your nuts and betting medium with all of your marginal made hands, that you'll be face up. But that is not true because we're going to make sure that we include bluffs and traps in both ranges. Is this a summary of the cash game lesson? No. To some extent, we're straight going through it. Is this content from the Cash Game Masterclass? It is. If you enjoy, smash the like button. That's exactly right. All right. So what size should your bets be? Well, you're going to have 2 very distinct sizes. You're going to have a small bet size, something like 10% pot to 50% pot, give or take. Typically, when you're out of position, you're going to find you want to bet on the small side. When you're in position, you're going to want to be betting on the bigger side. So out of position, a tiny river bet is very often recommended from a GTO point of view, like 10% pot. A lot of people don't do it, but you should. You may say, why in the world would I bet 10% pot on the river out of position? It's because with a lot of your hands that have, we'll say 55-ish% equity against your opponent's range, they can make a tiny bit of profit by betting, but if you check and then face a bet, assuming your opponent plays reasonably well, they're going to be somewhat polarized. And if they're polarized, that results in your hand being break even instead of profitable. So would you rather profit or break even? The answer is you'd rather profit, right? And your large bet size is usually going to be somewhere between 2/3 pot and gigantic, as big as you can make it to some extent. So why so big? Well, the GTO strategy, assuming you give the solver all sorts of options, is very often to bet the maximum with the nuts, whatever the maximum is. And for balance, you're going to want to make sure you include some bluffs in that range. This is called polarization, and it makes you very, very difficult to play against because if you have some nuts and some nothing, then how is your opponent going to know what you have? It puts them in a guessing game, and you want to put your opponents in a guessing game because if you're perfectly polarized, you win on average whatever is in the pot. Is this a rerun? No, it's not a rerun. Does this look like a rerun? Can you use these for online games? I already answered your question, Akram. Make sure you're paying attention. The answer is yes. All right. Let's see. So what bet sizes should we be using? How do we structure our ranges? Well, essentially, your entire range on the river can be classified into 4 broad categories. Obviously, the board's going to impact where your specific type of hand falls in this category, but here's an example. Say on a board of 10, 9, 5, king, 3, we have a range, including hands like 8, 7 of diamonds. How does 8, 7 of diamonds fare on this board? Well, it has basically 0% equity, right? This is a total garbage, no showdown value hand. What about a hand like ace 4 of hearts? That's a hand with a little bit of showdown value, but not much. It's a pretty bad hand, but it does have some showdown value. What about jack 9 of diamonds? That may be good enough to go for thin value. What about a hand like ace 10 of spades? Well, that's the super nuts, and you can very clearly be happy betting with that. You're going to find that hands in this category up here, hands that have 65 to 100% equity against your opponent's range, very often want to be betting on the big side. You want to be blasting it. Hands for thin value, you want to be going for the medium bet. And then you're going to want to consider bluffing with hands in this bottom category. Sometimes you're bluffing with your showdown value hands, sometimes with your no showdown value hands, primarily depending on the blocker, the type of blockers that you have in your range. Okay? So let's go through a quick example to categorize some hands. Let's say you raise the 3 big blinds from the button and get a caller from the big blind. You see bet 33% pot on the flop, turn goes check, check, and the big blind checks you on the river. How would we classify the following hands? Take a second, think about it. What about ace 2? Top pair, no kicker. Take a second, think about it. Well, top pair, no kicker is basically a thin value hand. You can't blast it and expect to get called by too many worse hands, right? So this is a very clear thin value hand. It's not a some showdown value hand. It's definitely a strong, thin value hand. What about jack 10? Well, jack 10 is clearly the nuts, right? This is definitely a premium made hand. Play along, type in the chat. Enjoy this. This is not a ask me anything, do not ask random questions. I will not answer, sorry. Rough Hun with a tier 3 sub. Welcome. Not even sure I know what a tier 3 sub means. I'm out of it. We got to pay attention to this stuff. What about 10, 8 of diamonds? The 10 high. Clearly not a good hand. This is a no showdown value hand. What about 7, 6? You flop 2 pair. It looked good. Don't know why you wouldn't bet the turn, by the way. Tier 3 sub means they pay you more money, lol. Indeed. 7, 6 is a some showdown value hand, right? If it goes check, check on the river, you probably win. Fine. So, in this scenario, we want to go about structuring these 3 types of hands. We have these 3 types of bet size. We have a large bet size, a small bet size, and a check size, okay? So, our big bet size is going to be mostly nuts plus what? Some bluffs, obviously. Our small bet size is going to be mostly thin value hands, 5 to 10% premium hands, and then a few bluffs. And our checking range is going to be mostly no showdown value hands, a few nut hands when you're out of position, and also some bluffs. Okay? So, what percentage of bluffs do you need to have for each bet size? Well, in general, as you bet larger and larger, you get to have more bluffs in your range. And the maximum bluffs you can possibly have in your range gets close to 50% as your bet size becomes infinite. But usually you do not bet infinite in no limit Texas Hold'em, right? Usually you're betting something like a third pot, 2/3 pot, 500% pot, right? So that means that you do not get to have 50% bluffs in your range because then your opponent could just easily call because you're getting great pot odds. Well, they're getting very pot odds. So the percentage of bluffs you can have in your range equals the amount your opponent needs to call divided by the total pot they could win. So on the river, let's say you bet 33 big blinds into a 100 big blind pot. Roughly what percentage bluffs should you have? Is there a mental heuristic you can use to calculate these percentages off the table? So far, everything we've been discussing is very rough. These are all general concepts. You don't need to calculate any of this stuff at the table. You just need to understand the concepts that come from these numbers so far. Does anybody know what percentage bluffs we can have? This presumes we're going to be reasonably polarized. Well, 33 divided by 100 plus 33 plus 33 equals 20% bluffs. Why? We're betting 33, and the opponent has to call 33 to win 100 plus their 33 plus our 33. So we could have 25% bluffs in this scenario. Okay, so remember, the max bluffs converge to 50% 1-to-1 as the bet size becomes infinite. All of you are getting this wrong. Besides Kevin Smith. Good job, Kevin. Make sure you study. If you don't study, you're not going to know what to do. All right. When you bet small, 33% pot, you can have about 20% bluffs. When you bet 50% pot, you can have 25% bluffs. When you bet large pot, you can have 33% bluffs. When you bet 2x pot, 200% times pot, if the pot's 100, you bet 200, you can have 40% bluffs. And if you bet 3x pot, you can have 43% bluffs. Okay? And essentially, this is how this is going to impact your general range composition. Remember, in a lot of spots, you're going to have, like, let's say a 10% bet size and a 100% bet size, or a 50% pot bet size and a 300% pot bet size, okay? In general, as you're betting smaller, you're going to have a lot of thin value hands, right? When you're betting bigger, you have almost no thin value hands, okay? All right. Let's discuss the impacts of your opponents having traps in their range. How does that impact your bluffing percentage? Well, a trap is an opponent hand that can beat hands that are in your polarized value betting range. And the more traps your opponent can have, the less you can bluff. Why? Because if your value hands no longer win 100% of the time, then you need to be bluffing less often, right? So factors that generally increase the amount of traps your opponents can have in their range are if your opponent has a large nut advantage. If they just have a whole lot of nut hands in their range, well, they're probably going to trap sometimes, right? When your opponent has a large range disadvantage, meaning they cannot bet with anything because your range is so good, that means they should check with everything. There are a lot of spots in No Limit Hold'em where your opponent gets a really bad river card and they have to check with everything. If they have to check with everything, then that means everything includes the nuts, right? Typically, when you bet using a small bet size, you're just naturally kind of unpolarized. When you're value betting top pair bad kicker, sometimes it loses, right? So you're often going to want to bluff a little bit less often in general in those scenarios as well. Or if your opponent's just like known to slow play, then obviously you want to do a little bit more checking. So essentially, if we thought we were perfectly polarized betting pot, we would bet with 67% premium hands, 33% bluffs. But as traps become more likely, we're going to include some extra checks, essentially. So we're going to be bluffing less often. Okay? Does that make sense? Only 52 likes. Well, everyone doesn't like this. A free way to support the channel, not just mine, but everybody on YouTube's, is to click the like button. We would appreciate it. Let's see. Let's discuss analyzing our exact hand. Should I bet or check this exact hand? And if I bet for value, which size should I use? This is amazing content. Well, you can get the entire Cash Game Masterclass at pokercoaching.com/cyberweek for a big discount. This is part of a gigantic presentation, many hours long. I'm currently on slide 620 of just the post-flop section, not even discussing the pre-flop section. So it's a big presentation. Took a lot of time, took a lot of effort, not just for me, but for my team. It was a big effort, but I'm glad to provide it to you. So first things first, is your exact hand in one of your best hands? Also, is your opponent likely to have something that can call a large bet? If the answer is yes, you want to be betting big for the most part. Keeping in mind you do want to balance your small bet size by having some nut hands in it. But if you have a really good hand and your opponent's likely to have something that can reasonably call a big bet, you're going to want to be betting big. Next, is your opponent one of your thin value hands? If yes, you want to be betting small. If no, do you need to bluff with this hand to balance your range? If no, then you just check it back. If yes, though, you're going to want to use the bluffing decision flowchart. I'm about to share this flowchart with you. Before we do that, there are a few key terms you need to understand. First are auto calls. Auto calls are hands in your opponent's range that are calling pretty much no matter what. If your opponent has top pair good kicker on a relatively uncoordinated board and they check and you bet any amount on the river, they're just not folding, right? These are auto calls. Auto folds are the hands that are going to fold to any bet, even a small one. These are going to be hands like busted draws for the most part. And blockers. Blockers are cards that make it more difficult for your opponent to have a particular hand. Blockers become more relevant as they are realistically in your opponent's range. Also, as they remove combinations of calling hands from your opponent's range, and as the bet size generally increases. So, here is the bluffing decision flow chart. This is what you need to be thinking about when you decide which specific hands you're bluffing with. Okay? So let's just walk through this nice and slow. Is the opponent capable of folding? If they're not, don't bluff. Duh, right? Is your opponent going to call? Then don't bluff. If your opponent is capable of folding, though, then obviously you're going to be at least somewhat inclined to bluff. By the way, we're going to go through and you're going to find that some of these are often going to be no, some of these are often going to be yes, and it's going to be a bit of a mix. Okay? But then you have to figure out if the yeses override the nos. Do you lack showdown value? As you have less and less showdown value, you should typically be more inclined to bluff. Do I have many value hands in your range? As you have more and more value hands in your range, you want to be more inclined to have more bluffs in your range just to naturally balance it, right? If you're only value betting the river with like the super nuts for whatever reason, which should not be the case, but if that is the case, then you should not bluff very many hands because you don't have very many nut hands, right? Are your blockers highly relevant? Do you make it more difficult for your opponent to have auto calls, right? If that's the answer is yes. Do you unblock your opponent's auto folds? For example, if you're trying to get your opponent to fold out, I don't know, let's say busted king high straight draw and you're sitting there with like 7-6 for some weird nut low, you do not block some of the king high and queen high type hands you're trying to get to fold, right? So in that case, you should be more inclined to bluff. But if you do not unblock your opponent's auto folds, let's say, for example, you have a busted flush draw, but you're trying to get your opponent to fold mostly flush draws, that's a problem. You're going to find, funny enough, from a GTO point of view, busted flush draws very often bet the flop, bet the turn, but then do not bluff the river because you do not unblock your opponent's auto folds. Next, does your bluff tell a reasonable story? Would you actually play value hands this way? If you're playing good GTO poker, you probably will play value hands in this way because you play value hands in every way. All right, so once we decide we're going to bluff, next we have to pick our bet size, okay? Do you have zero showdown value? No showdown value whatsoever. If the answer is yes, you typically want to be betting large. If you have a little bit of showdown value, maybe you want to be betting small. This is a dicey point. I mean, GTO is like all over the place here. It kind of mixes it up, but in general, when you bet large and your opponent calls, it doesn't really matter if you have like ace high because you always lose, right? Whereas if you bet small, every once in a while, they call you with a worse hand. Does your opponent have many marginal made hands in their range? As their range is more and more hands like middle pair, you typically want to be betting bigger and bigger because that's what you're trying to get to fold, right? And big bets will make middle pair fold. Do you block many nut hands? Meaning your opponent's auto calls are going to make up a smaller percentage of their range. If that's the case, you usually want to be betting big. Am I trying to get my opponent off of a strong hand? Strong meaning, top pair or middle pair top kicker, something like that. If the answer is yes, you usually want to be betting big. And are you representing a nutted hand? If you are, you probably want to be betting on the big side because you want to bet big with your nuts. Okay, let's skip forward to an example here. Let's say you raise the 3 big blinds pre-flop from the button with queen jack of diamonds and get a caller from the big blind who's playing tightly. You continuation bet, 33% pot on the flop, turn goes check check, and big blind checks you on the river. Should we bluff with queen jack of diamonds on king 6, 3, king 2? Well, is the opponent capable of folding? Yes, they're probably playing kind of tightly. Do you lack showdown value with queen high here? Not really. Queen high can actually win on king 6, 3, king 2 because your opponent's going to have some busted heart draws, etc. It's kind of in the middle. Do you have many value hands in your range? Sure, we can definitely value bet probably like any 6 or better here, right? Any 6 or better is definitely a value bet. Are my blockers highly relevant? Not really. Do you unblock your opponent's auto folds? Auto folds here are going to be stuff like flush draws. We do not block those. Kind of not so relevant in this scenario, though, I don't think, because like ace queen and ace jack are probably just going to call. Does my bluff tell a credible story? Sure. We would definitely bet the flop with 6-5, check turn, value bet river, right? So, pretty decent spot to bluff. Next, how much should we bet? Do we have no showdown value? No, but this is not so relevant. Because in this scenario, like, are they calling queen 10? Probably not. Not against a tight player. Does my opponent have many marginal made hands? Depends on what you want to call marginal made hand here. They probably have a lot of ace highs, right? So not really. Do you block many nut hands? Medium point. Probably doesn't matter so much. Are you trying to get your opponent off of a strong hand? No, we're not trying to get him to fold a king or a pocket jacks, right? Are you trying to represent a nutted hand? No, we're trying to represent a very marginal made range of like pocket 10s and stuff like that. So typically in this scenario, we're going to want to bet with this type of hand like queen jack of diamonds, and we're probably going to want to bet using a small size. Okay? Let's discuss positional differences really quick, then we'll go through a few GTO examples. If you're enjoying this, click the like and subscribe button. I would appreciate it. Is Cash Game Masterclass best for small stakes play? It's best for playing against opponents who play reasonably well, and then you adjust to take advantage of what your opponent's doing correctly. We have a lot of sections on adjustments, but it's important to know how to play fundamentally sound so that you know where to adjust to take advantage of what your opponents do incorrectly, JS. All right, in position has a non-zero cost of reopening the action, and the cost is that the out-of-position player will raise, and then you will have to fold. So this leads to two in-position adjustments. The in-position player is the person last act. When the stack to pot ratio is 1 or less, meaning let's say the pot's $500 and you have $500 behind, you should usually use only one bet size when you are in position, and that's going to be a large size. Either you're all in or you are checking. Something a lot of people do wrong is they get cute and they bet 50% pot out of their 100% pot total bet. Nope, not from a GTO point of view. When your stack to pot ratio is something like 1 or more, so say you have $1,000 and the pot's 500, then you're going to want to have a bigger bet size. Well, in position is going to have bigger bet sizes in general than out of position. So typically you're going to be betting 50% pot with some value hands and all in for 2x pot with the rest of your value hands, whereas out of position is going to be going for smaller bet sizes. Notice that out of position never closes the action. And out of position has the opportunity to raise if it goes check and then in position player bets. So the out of position player, person to go at first on the river, should value bet small with hands perhaps as weak as third pair when it goes check on the turn, or if they bet the turn and then they get there to the river, right? And this small bet size should usually be really small, like 10% pot to 33% pot. On especially good rivers, where out of position's equity is very high, they should usually use a single small bet size because they have a big range advantage. We discussed range advantage thoroughly in the Cash Game Masterclass. And you want to make sure your checking range contains some value hands to check raise and some bluffs to check raise. Out of position check raise decision algorithm. How high in my range am I? When you're looking to check raise, you want to check raise with the nuts. You want to be very, very sure that you have the best hand. And typically, as your opponent is more likely to bet, you can check raise more often. Okay? But you want to make sure you also include some bluffs in your check raising range. So our check raising range is going to be very, 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 very polarized. Okay? You're going to find that usually the best hands to check raise bluff on the river are going to be hands that have some showdown value if it goes check. Quite often, this is going to be when you make something like middle pair or bottom pair on the river. If you check the river and it goes check, you probably win. right? But if you check in your opponent bets, well, now you may not win with something like bottom pair. So if you don't win with your bottom pair now, maybe it's a good check raise bluff. It's a particularly good check raise bluff because it blocks your opponent from having some auto calls. Auto calls are going to be their rivered two pairs or rivered sets, right? Also, is your hand too weak to call a bet? Bottom pair on the river usually is. Is your opponent's range capped? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But a big important point here is you're going to find your check raising range on the river is going to be your very, very strong hands that are almost always good. And then also hands that block your opponents from improving on the river. And that's usually going to be stuff like rivered bad pairs. Okay. You all want to go through some examples? I have some examples loaded up. Let me know. I know we've been going for 30 minutes already. If you do, we'll go through them. If you don't, we won't. While I'm waiting on you all to answer, we'll go through. Table of contents for the Cash Game Masterclass. It will give you everything you need to crush cash games. We have the introduction section. We go through equity, pot odds, ranges, putting all those together, counting combinations, etc., etc. We have the pre-flop section where we go through all sorts of scenarios, 100 big blinds deep and 200 big blinds deep, because I realize cash games are played deep stacked, right? Very deep stacked. We have a flop section discussing all the common scenarios you're going to encounter on the flop. Then we do the same thing for the turn. We do the same thing for the river. Then we have various other topics. If you want to check this out, if you enjoy this, if you enjoyed today's show, make sure you check out pokercoaching.com/cyberweek for a big discount. All right, let's take a look at this spot. We're going to take this slowly. 100 big blinds deep, big blind versus button. Button raises, big blind calls. Flop comes, 9-7-5, big blind checks, button checks behind. Okay? You may say, why didn't they continuation bet? They should check behind on this board some portion of the time because this board is really good for the big blind. Fine. Turn is a two of hearts. Big blind bets 120% pot. They overbet the turn. Why in the world would they overbet the turn? Well, you're going to have to go to the turn section for this. We discussed this thoroughly. When it goes check, check on the flop and you have a lot of nuts in your range and your opponent doesn't, you typically want to be betting big with some portion of your range, quite often a lot of your range. This is a spot where you definitely want to be betting big from out of position when you were playing deep stack. This is something a lot of people do wrong. We're not going to go into this too much today. I discuss it thoroughly in the turn section in the masterclass. All right, we overpot it. 120% pot, button calls. Here we are on the river. This graph here shows how much equity the big blind has on various rivers. If you think about the big betting range on the turn, it's going to be a lot of hands like eights for straight draws, sixes for straight draws, already super nut hands, sets, two pairs, etc. Various overcard bluffs like Jack 10, Queen Jack, etc. And that's about it. You got to realize when the player on the button calls, what are they going to likely have? They likely have a 9 or a 7 or a 5, right? Because they will let it go check, check on the flop. So 9, 7, and 5, notice in that scenario, the button has a lot of equity because they are going to have a lot of 9s, 7s, and 5s in the spot, right? They probably would have bet a lot of their 8s and 6s on the flop, though, so when the 8 or 6 comes on the river, we have a lot of those in the big blind. Other cards are all pretty neutral, okay? So how does that impact your betting strategy? The hands in red are bet, hands in green are checked. Notice on the river 9-7-5, we don't actually do a whole lot of betting because we don't actually have all that much equity. And you're going to find when you don't have all that much equity, when you are going to bet, you're typically going to bet on the bigger side for the most part. The darker the red color you see, the bigger you're betting. So notice on a 9 river, when you are betting, you're going to have a whole lot of trips, right? Trips are really good. And you're also going to have a whole lot of 8s and 6s that definitely want to be bluffing. Over cards, you have lots of various river top pairs. Notice your opponent's going to fold out stuff like king, queen on the turn, whereas you may decide to overbet turn with king, queen, right? Notice 8s and 6s, you have a large equity advantage, right? 8s and 6s, you have a large equity advantage. When you have a large equity advantage, like we said, you're often going to want to have a single small bet size, and you see in this scenario, you're mostly betting small or medium with a large chunk of your range, right? So let's take a look at the river 8, okay? 9, 7, 5, 2, 8. On the river, this is roughly what the big blind's strategy looks like. So what are we betting and what are we checking? Well, we have this handy dandy chart here that will show us. We have two bet sizes, a 60% pot bet and a 25% pot bet. Our 60% pot bet range is going to be mostly straights for the nuts. Remember, our big bet size is going to be very polarized to mostly nuts or nothing. So our 60% bet size here is going to be a lot of straights, which are the nuts, sets, which are pretty close to the nuts, because remember, the opponent doesn't have very many straights when they check the flop. 2 pair, and then top pair. You may say, is top pair good enough to value bet here? It is. And then we have some bluffs. Ace high, king high, nothing. Our small bet size is going to be a few nuts, a lot of thin value hands, top pair bad kicker primarily, and then some garbage, right? If you go through this range, you'll see that's exactly what is happening. You can screenshot it and look at it later. Let's take a look at 9, 7, 5, 2, 9. Well, now, remember, this card is very good for the opponent. When the river is very good for the opponent, you're going to be betting infrequently, but usually very polarized. If you take a look at here, we have an all-in bet size and 120% pot bet size and almost no other bets. So you see on the 8 or 6 river, we have a lot of small bet sizes, almost no overbetting and no all-in betting. But on the 9, we're doing a lot of overbetting or checking. And if we take a look at the way this range breaks down, when we are overbetting, in this spot we have nuts, 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 or nothing, right? Our smaller bet size is going to be slightly less value hands. We see stuff like like queen 9 for trips as well. King 9 for trips as well. It's a similar composition. But the checking range is going to be a lot of hands with decent showdown value. So we have some pairs, a few nuts. Want to make sure you protect the checking range. Ace high that, actually could be good in this scenario. And then some garbage, right? When we're checking, we are checking and folding pretty frequently here because this river is very good for the opponent. Okay? Let me find another fun spot to go through. Betting from in position on the river. Let's take a look at an in position spot. All right. Button raises, big blind calls. Flop comes ace jack 5. Big blind checks, button bets 2/3 pot. Opponent calls. Turns to 2. Big blind checks. Button now bets 120% pot. Again, an overbet on the turn. Why? In general, 2 flush draw turns, you want to be betting on the big side. Also, when the opponent check calls flop, they did not check raise. You want to continue blasting it with stuff like ace, king, ace, queen, etc. in the scenario because they're almost always good, but they're very vulnerable to being outdrawn. Okay? So, as we can see in this scenario, there aren't actually any good rivers. You may say, why in the world do we not have any good rivers? Because when the opponent calls the 120% pot bet on the turn, they have something, right? So you see, like an ace is actually a bad river because they're always going to check call the turn with their ace. They check call flop with an ace, they check call turn with an ace, and it's not great. Same thing with the jack, right? King and queen are pretty great. Jack's pretty good too because that's going to give us random 2 pairs and random straights. You're going to find that our turn betting range is going to contain gut shot straight draws, flush draws, etc. So neat scenario, right? Where when we blast turn and get called, we don't really love it, but blasting turn something like ace king is good because you very likely do have the best hand. So take a look at this scenario. Given the previous range where we saw whenever you don't have a whole lot of equity, you don't do a whole lot of betting, you should hopefully be able to infer that in this scenario, since we don't have many rivers that are great for us, we're going to be doing checking on a lot of rivers, right? So notice on basically every river, we're checking 40 or 50 or 60% of the time, give or take. A whole lot of checking on the river. And when you do a whole lot of checking, you usually want to be betting big when you do bet because when you are betting, it's with a really, really good hand, right? You're going to be very polarized, meaning you have a really good hand or you have a bluff. Okay? So in this scenario, you see, when we get the river 8 of diamonds, random blank, when we bet very big with our nuts. Ace jack, pocket jacks, ace 5, pocket 5s, pocket jacks, and then a smattering of nonsense. 10-7, 10-6, 9-7, 9-6, queen 4, queen 3. And how much are we betting? We're betting all in, all of our money. You may say, are you actually doing this in the real game? Yeah. Especially if we have no clue how the opponent plays, if we're not trying to maximally exploit them in some way, etc., etc. If you do not know what your opponent does incorrectly, you want to be playing good, strong, fundamentally sound poker. Now, I will say, in live poker, when your opponent check calls your overbet on the turn in live poker, you may want to bluff a little bit less often because a lot of players have something like an ace and they're just not going to fold it. That said, whenever you blast them on the river for overpot, a lot of people start folding out even hands like top pair. Okay? Do we have time for river exploits? No. We've been going long enough. If you want to learn about river exploits and all sorts of other stuff, make sure you check out the masterclass. By the way, this is just this tiny, tiny sampling of what we have in this section. I mean, I'm just going to quick flip through here. You see lots and lots of examples, lots of boards, lots of scenarios, lots of spots. It keeps going on and on and on and on and on and on and on. Get to see some of these handy dandy graphs. We explain all of this in the Cash Game Masterclass. Make sure you check it out. We're currently having a Cyber Week sale. If you want to check it out, it ends Monday, December 6th. For 1 week only. It's going to be the lowest prices we have ever had on a 3-month membership. I listened to all of you. You all said, we saw you gave a discount for Black Friday for yearly memberships. I don't have enough money for a yearly membership. Fine. We're going to give you the lowest price ever for a 3-month membership. To be fair, look. You're probably not going to get everything out of pokercoaching.com that you need to in just 3 months. I'm going to be honest with you. You're not going to get through the thing in terms of really fully understanding it. But it is a very, very good introduction to studying and working hard. And, selfishly, you're going to find out that if you get in there and you actually work hard and you learn and perhaps you get in some of our 30-day challenges, you are going to want to stick around because you're going to watch your poker skills improve. It's pretty exhilarating to go from playing okay poker to playing great poker because that's going to result in your win rate going through the roof. So, check it out. During the Cyber Week sale, you can get the lowest price we have ever given on our 3-month premium membership at pokercoaching.com. It's $188, about $1. Is that $1 per day? $2 per day. A third the price of a Starbucks coffee. Okay? You're going to find that this is a good membership to get through it. But really, if you want to thoroughly study it, you may need a little bit more. Anyway, we've already been through this Cash Game Masterclass. It is everything you need to succeed at cash games. We have our introduction section. We have all of these videos discussing how to play pre-flop. Then we discuss post-flop play, including playing on the flop, and the turn, and the river, in single raise pots, 3-bet pots, 200 big blind pots, etc., 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 etc. We have also discussion on various topics because these topics are actually very, very important. For example, game selection and seat selection are vitally important. You're going to find that in a lot of casinos, there may be a table that's really good, but there may be a few seats at that table that are actually very, very bad. And if you sit there, you're probably going to lose, or at least not win a ton. You want to make sure you're getting in the right seat to win as much money as possible. I know you all want this, but it is not for sale. Sorry. It's available exclusively for Poker Coaching Premium members. I know some of you have been saying, does this apply to tournaments? It does when you're playing deep stacked, but you need to make sure you're using different strategies for when you're playing tournaments, which is why we have my Tournament Masterclass. It's a very, very similar structure where we go through lots and lots of scenarios, but instead of going through 100 and 200 big blind deep scenarios, for the most part, we're going through 20 and 40 big blind scenarios, which is mostly where you're playing in most tournaments. Now, obviously, you can supplement this with the Cash Game Masterclass because I realize in most tournaments you do start playing deep stacked, but most of the play in tournaments is played relatively shallow stacked. Our members are crushing it. Here's Max Tave. I met Max at one of my breakfasts that I had for poker coaching members at the World Series of Poker this year. He brought me some macadamia nuts from Hawaii. He took third place in the reunion tournament for a very, very, very solid $241,000. Huge congrats to him. Good job. Good work. Also, in Poker Coaching Premium, you get access to all of these courses. You can buy them individually if you'd like, but I would not recommend that. I would recommend you sign up and you go through them as you see fit. Study whatever you want to study. Study what makes sense for you. Like if you're going to the World Series, go through the World Series of Poker preparation sessions where I coached one of my students, Blah Zerjau, for many hours back and forth. And he actually didn't do so great at the World Series. But right after that, he won another big tournament for a whole bunch of money. Maybe we have a slide with him in here. I'm not sure. If you want to go through like building a big stack in tournaments, this is a big problem a lot of people have. They often just kind of hang out. They don't really build big stacks. That's a problem. You need to get a hold of big stacks so that you can actually win. We also have lots and lots of cash game sessions, including me reviewing various live cash games. We discuss beating 6-max cash games online. We discuss beating loose live cash games where everybody sees every flop, where every hand's limped, right? We discuss those scenarios. All of this is available if you are a Poker Coaching Premium member. You can buy the courses if you want, but again, it's not the best value. Look, I'm trying to make sure that you all spend your resources wisely. I realize that money is limited for basically every person, and I'm just giving it all for you, you know? Sign up for Poker Coaching Premium, you just get it all. We also have over 1,400 hand quizzes where we go through all sorts of hands that I've played and that my coaches have played. Speaking of the coaches, I've paid them over $500,000 so far to make the content for you. To be fair, they're actually making the content for me because I want to learn from all of these world-class pros. I hire the coaches who I want to learn from, the people who really impress me at the table and away from the table. And, you know, these are many of the best players in the world. We have, for example, Bert Stevens, Giraffe Ganger, one of the absolute number one, well, he was number one player in the world earlier this year online. He gets on there and streams live for Poker Coaching Premium members. And he crushes it. He guarantees a final table every session. I don't know what happens if he doesn't actually final table because he's final table won every single time so far. We also have James Romero, one of the biggest winners in tournaments, a super crusher, absolute crusher. We have Jonathan Jaffe, who final tabled a few World Series of poker tournaments this year. Matt Affleck has amazing webinars every single week for Poker Coaching Premium members, where he basically goes through and discusses how he is studying. He shares his study with all of you. He's been absolutely crushing it. If you all play Spin and Goes, we have Ryan O'Donnell. He is one of the biggest winners in online Spin and Goes. Really, Google any of these people, you will see that they are all crushing it. Also, you all may not know this, because I've kept it kind of quiet, but I've been coaching a small number of students in my Inner Circle coaching program twice a month for the last 5 years. Believe it or not, I'm not new to this. I realize a lot of you have not been with me for 5 years. But we've had students who've been learning with me for 5 years. But I decided to close down the Inner Circle program. Today was actually the last webinar, so that I could focus on helping my Poker Coaching Premium members even more. To some extent, all the premium members are going to become my Inner Circle. Although the Inner Circle is no longer available, I did record all of the coaching sessions for the last 5 years. I have over 240 hours of recorded sessions. So, what we're going to do is if you join Poker Coaching Premium now, you're going to get the biggest bonus I have ever given. If you join before the end of the Cyber Week sale, you will get access to the 240 hours of Inner Circle one-on-one coaching videos. And you'll continue to have access to these as long as you are a member. It's kind of like private coaching sessions with players of various skill levels. Some of them are really, really good players. One of them is one of the biggest winners on one of the legal American sites. And also some of the players were very recreational initially, but they've actually become pretty good. Multiple players are now smashing 5-10 no limit. When they started, they were struggling to beat 1-3, but they devoted a lot of time and energy and effort to getting good at poker. Now they're winning. Who'd have thought? We also have the 30-day tournament preparation challenge. Every day, for 30 days, I'm going to send you a video to watch on a specific topic. And after you watch the video, you'll take a quiz to make sure that you're learning before moving on to the next day. And by the end of this 30-day challenge, you're going to know how to play most spots in tournaments pretty optimally. Going through this active learning process every single day will get you in the habit of studying. And if you get in the habit of studying and you're playing against people who do not study, you're going to be way ahead of them in time. Here's another one of our members, Laura Eisenberg. She won the ladies tournament this year for $115,000. Good job, good work. I actually just released a YouTube video with her. We made a few YouTube videos together discussing some of the hands that she played deep in that tournament. So congrats to her. If you're a cash game player, we have a 30-day cash game challenge. Cash games can be very profitable if you know how to do two primary things. You need to know how to play fundamentally sound poker, and you need to know how to take advantage of the mistakes your opponents make. So I created this 30-day cash game challenge to help you quickly develop these skills so that you can smash the cash games and win a bunch of money. So here's the offer. You can get Poker Coaching Premium, which is normally $100 a month, as a 3-year subscription for less than the price of the Poker Coaching Standard membership, which gives you access to some of the content, but not all of it. You can get 3 years for $1,399. I fully realize a lot of people in the poker content creation space do not do what I do. They maybe show up and make some content once every few months and they disappear off social media. You don't hear from them for 3 months. Their students don't hear from them for 3 months. I don't know what they're doing. Nobody knows. Some people make one course and then they forget about it. And their course is 4 hours long or 8 hours long and think, yeah, this is it. This is all you need to know. But I hate to break it to you. It's not. Poker's a big game. I'm consistently uploading tons of content to Poker Coaching from myself and my other coaches. And we're going to be here. We're going to be here for a while. Like I said, I've been with my Inner Circle members for 5 years, right? To be fair, when did I start poker training sites? A long time ago. Goodness gracious, was it 2005? I've only been here 16 years. Still doing it. So anyway, if you want to get 3 years, check it out, $1,399. Man, that feels too cheap. I have to talk with the marketing people about that. That feels too cheap. Here's another one of our Poker Coaching members, Gershon Distenfeld. He actually signed up to Poker Coaching because he loved my YouTube content. He's like, look, I love your YouTube content. I learned from it a lot. I'm going to sign up for your training site. I may or may not watch any videos, but, you've helped me a lot already at poker. And he actually final tabled the main event of the World Series online last year's $10,000 buy-in tournament online. And he asked me to coach him. He asked how much I would charge. Well, I knew from listening to an interview or two from him that he was giving away all of the money that he won to charity. He's doing well enough in life. He's happy to give back to help other people. And I said, I'll coach you for free. So I eventually learned that he did not really care about moving up the payout ladder. He wanted to win the bracelet. Fine. We have no payout implications now. And guess what happened? He did not win the bracelet. He took 8th place. He was short sat going into it, and he played to win the tournament, which was fine. Fine and good. That's what we were trying to do. He did exactly what I would have done in his shoes. Fast forward to this year. He goes to the World Series to play a few tournaments, including the No Limit Hold'em Shootout. Shootouts are perfectly designed for everything we worked on because there are no payout implications in shootouts. In a shootout, you start with, let's say, 1,000 people in the tournament, and then you start with 100 10-handed tables. You play until one person has all the chips at each table. Then all those winners combine to 10 10-person tables. Then all the winners from that combined to one 10-handed final table. That's basically what happened here. And there were no payout jumps. You either won your table or you didn't up until you get to the final table. So anyway, he smashed him. He won the tournament. He won the bracelet. $204,000 going straight to charity. Helped him a little bit along the way, but he did all the hard work. Congrats to Gershon. Good job, good work. Like I said, a lot of you wanted me to discount Poker Coaching a little bit more for the quarterly memberships, the 1-year memberships, etc. Because, like you said, I realize funds are not unlimited for everyone. I realized when I first started playing poker, I had $50 to my name. I was working at an airport, doing everything I could to possibly succeed at poker. And I bought a bunch of books, as you see. Still have a bunch of books back here. And that's how you had to learn back in the day. There were no training sites. But I've made PokerCoaching.com to be the site that I wanted for today and the site that I wish I had whenever I was in the process of really trying to level up my poker skills. So if you sign up for Poker Coaching Premium, you can even do it for the lowest price ever for a 3-year membership. You're going to get access to all of this stuff you see here. We have live weekly coaching webinars with myself and all the other pros, over 1,400 interactive hand quizzes, thousands of GTO preflop charts. I didn't even talk about that. We have an app with a preflop hand quiz where essentially we've loaded up our preflop GTO charts and quiz you in scenarios and ask you how to go about playing those spots. Also, we have GTO preflop charts. You can just load them up and look at them really, really quickly. We also have over 300 coaching webinars on specific topics, over 185 hand history reviews. We have hundreds of video classes, loads and loads of implementable or adjusted preflop charts to take advantage of various types of games, and also lots of homework webinars, which we won't even get into today. Homework is its own big thing. Also, if you sign up, you'll get 240 hours of the Inner Circle coaching program, exclusive access to the all-new Cash Game Masterclass, the Tournament Masterclass, and the 30-day Cash Game and Tournament Challenge, as well as over 150 courses that are usually 4 to 8 hours long on very specific topics. That's not enough. If I fail to deliver on my promise to give you everything you could need to achieve your full poker potential, I do not want or deserve your money. This is not a get-rich-quick scheme. This is something to help you succeed at poker long-term. If you're not completely satisfied with Poker Coaching Premium or pokercoaching.com, let my team know within 30 days of signing up, and we will give you a full 100% refund. I'm serious about it. If I do not help you get better at poker, I do not want your money because I've not provided you value. I personally think life is all about adding value. And if I do not add value, I do not deserve your money. The great thing about helping people learn a skill, especially a skill like poker, is that they're going to make a lot more money with it than they pay me. I mean, I remember whenever I was first starting to learn to play poker, I paid someone $5,000 for $500 per hour for 10 hours of their coaching. And I thought, ooh, this is a little expensive. But then, you know what happened? I made $5,000 extra that month that I didn't make the previous month because I was playing better. He taught me a few things that increased my win rate. And then the next month, I made $5,000 more extra dollars. The next month, I made $5,000 more extra dollars. So it's like, it's free, right? It's literally free if you're actually going to sit there and put in volume. Is it possible to buy this poker coaching hat? Do I have one on the floor? Here, you can have this one. If you sign up to Poker Coaching Premium, send me an email, and we'll send it to you for free. It's just part of being a Poker Coaching Premium member. Literally free. Send me an email. We'll send it to you. Support at pokercoaching.com. If you're a premium member, free hat. It also comes with patches and pins. We have neat little pins. Let me show you. Need to actually mail out these neat little pins. Yeah, cute. Anyway, that's there. Here we go. Paulie said you just got your hat and your pin. Great. I'm glad to hear it. Whenever I travel to live poker tournaments, I'm going to have breakfasts for my students at literally every tournament stop I go to. I don't know when I'm going to travel next. It's the holiday season. My kids both have birthdays in December. So do I. And, Decembers are always tough. But whenever I get back out to playing live poker, we're going to have breakfast for students. Last year, I remember going to Borgata, and an Inner Circle member actually was there. And he said it was his first time taking a shot at a $1,000 tournament. And I think he took second place in it. I was so excited for him. And at the World Series of Poker this year, we had 2 breakfasts that had about 40 people there each. Probably people here in the chat were at the breakfast. It was a lot of fun. They all got to meet each other, hang out. I got a point to talk to everybody. It was a great time. Eric says you want a pen. Well, if you're a Poker Coaching Premium member, send us an email, support at pokercoaching.com, and we'll mail it to you. Free, $0. Everyone asks, how much does it cost to buy the hat? Free. $0. All you gotta do is be a member. I'm doing my best to add value in every way I can. I mean, look, at the end of the day, I'll tell you how it works out. Hats cost me $10, $15. If you're gonna sign up to Poker Coaching Premium for a year or longer, I can send you a package that's gonna cost me $30 out the door. It's not a problem. I'm happy to do it. I am happy to do it. That's me for today. If you enjoyed this show, do me a favor, click the like and subscribe button. Also, check out pokercoaching.com/cyberweek. I'm doing everything I can to help all of you improve your poker skills. So, make good use of it. Make good use of the resources that I and all of these coaches have made for you. It is worth noting, it's not just me here. I realize that I make a lot of the content myself, but at the same time, I have a great team of people who will help you improve your skills. Now, I will say, a lot of people who sign up, they have insane information overload. They think, oh my God, there's all of this content. Literally every day there's new content going to the site. And you got to realize you're probably not going to watch everything, and that's okay. But you're going to find some coaches who resonate very much with you, who are teaching specifically the games that you want to learn. Some of the players discuss very high stakes stuff. Some discuss more low stakes stuff. Some discuss cash games, some tournaments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, you'll find people who resonate with you. And again, if you don't like it, get a refund. Do we accept cryptocurrencies? If you send an email, support at pokercoaching.com, we will accept cryptocurrencies, pogs, beanie babies, silver, gold, whatever you want to pay me with. It's okay. I do everything I can to help you out. If you have too many pogs in your basement, well, you can mail me some and we can unload those for you. All right, that's going to be it today. Check it out at pokercoaching.com/cyberweek. Thank you for being here. Good luck in your games. Have fun and make the most of your holiday season. If you're stuck at home with nothing to do, you might as well use that time to improve your poker skills. Good luck. Have fun. Thanks for being here. I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.